The knock came at 2:17 in the morning, 3 sharp taps against my apartment door that pulled me out of a restless sleep. When I opened it, my neighbor stood there barefoot, soaked from the rain, trembling so badly that she could barely hold herself upright. For 4 months, I had deliberately ignored her. I had avoided the hallway whenever I heard her door open, stopped returning her polite smiles, and once even pretended not to hear when she knocked on my door. But that night, she wasn't there to complain about my silence. She was holding an old photograph in one hand and a small envelope in the other, and the first thing she said made my entire body go cold. "I think you're the only person who can help me now." Before we continue, if stories about kindness, second chances, and the unexpected ways people can change each other's lives touch your heart, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs a little hope, leave a comment, and subscribe to Ripple of Kindness. Sometimes one small act of kindness can become someone's reason to keep going. 4 months earlier, I had moved into the apartment building after losing almost everything I thought my life was built on. My marriage had ended badly, my father had passed away, and the small business I had spent years building had collapsed within a few painful months. I wasn't looking for friendship. I wasn't looking for neighbors. I wanted silence. I wanted walls between myself and the rest of the world. The woman who lived next door seemed determined to break through those walls. Her name was Elena, and she had the kind of warm smile that made you feel as though she already knew you. The first morning she saw me struggling with boxes, she offered to help. I thanked her without looking up and told her I could manage. The next week, she left a small container of homemade soup outside my door with a handwritten note saying she hoped I was settling in. I threw the note away without reading it properly. A few days later, she asked if I wanted to join her for coffee downstairs. I told her I was busy. I wasn't. I was sitting alone in my apartment staring at an unpaid electricity bill. But admitting that I was struggling felt impossible, so I chose distance instead. Elena didn't stop being kind. Every few days, she would greet me in the hallway, ask if I was doing all right, or hold the elevator when she saw me coming. I answered with short words until eventually I stopped answering at all. Then one afternoon, something happened that made my coldness even worse. I heard crying through the wall. It was quiet at first, then louder, like someone desperately trying not to be heard. I stood in my living room listening for several minutes. I knew it was Elena. Every instinct told me to knock on her door, but another part of me whispered that her problems were not mine. I had enough problems of my own. So I turned up the television and pretended I couldn't hear her. That decision stayed with me longer than I understood. Weeks passed. Elena's footsteps became less frequent. Her cheerful greetings disappeared. Her door stayed closed more often. Strangely, I began noticing her absence only after I had succeeded in creating it. The hallway felt colder without her. One evening, I saw an ambulance outside the building. My heart jumped when I noticed paramedics carrying a medical bag toward the entrance. I almost went downstairs, but fear and pride stopped me again. The ambulance left 20 minutes later. I never asked what happened. By the 4th month, I had convinced myself that ignoring Elena had been the right decision. Then came the rain. At 2:17 that morning, she stood in front of me looking exhausted and frightened. I stepped aside and let her enter. She sat at the edge of my couch, clutching the envelope against her chest. Her hands were freezing. I brought her a towel and a cup of water, and for the first time in months, I actually looked at her face. She looked older than I remembered. There were dark circles beneath her eyes, and her usual confidence was gone. She opened the envelope and handed me a photograph. It showed an elderly man standing outside our apartment building beside a little girl. The little girl was Elena. The elderly man was my father. I couldn't breathe. She explained that years ago, before I had moved away for college, my father had been the building's caretaker. He had helped Elena's family when they were struggling. When her mother became sick, my father secretly paid several months of their rent. When Elena wanted to study but couldn't afford her books, he found ways to help her. He never told me because he believed kindness should not be performed for recognition. Then Elena showed me another photograph. It was my father sitting beside her mother in a hospital room. On the back was a date from 12 years earlier. My father had been there during one of the hardest moments of Elena's life. She told me that when she first saw me moving into the building, she recognized my last name. She realized who I was and felt as though life had given her an unexpected chance to thank the son of the man who had once helped her family. That was why she kept trying to reach me. I felt ashamed. Not because I hadn't known about my father's kindness, but because I had spent 4 months treating someone who carried a piece of his memory like an inconvenience. Then she told me why she had come that night. Her mother was dying. The hospital had called earlier that evening. Elena needed an expensive treatment that her insurance would not cover. She had already borrowed money from everyone she knew. She had sold her car and emptied her savings. She wasn't asking me for money, she said. She was asking me for help understanding something. She placed the envelope on my table. Inside was a letter written by my father. He had written it years before his death and given it to Elena's mother, asking her to keep it until Elena needed it. The letter said that if Elena ever found herself in a moment when she felt completely alone, she should remember that kindness never truly disappears. Sometimes it simply travels through people until it reaches someone who needs it. I read those words 3 times. That night changed something inside me. The next morning, I went with Elena to the hospital. I called people I hadn't spoken to in years. I contacted an old business partner, asked questions about community assistance programs, and searched for every possible way to help. Elena fought beside her mother for weeks. Some days were hopeful. Some were devastating. But she was no longer carrying everything alone. And something unexpected happened to me during those weeks. I started living again. I began opening my curtains. I started answering calls. I repaired the broken chair my father had once given me. I even returned to work, not because my old life had suddenly become perfect, but because I finally understood that losing everything didn't mean I had to lose everyone. Elena's mother eventually passed away peacefully, with Elena holding her hand. There was grief, but there was also gratitude. Months later, Elena and I stood outside the apartment building on a bright spring morning. She gave me the same photograph she had shown me that rainy night. I almost refused it, but she insisted. She told me my father had once helped her believe that strangers could become family. I told her that she had taught me something even more important. Sometimes we build walls to protect ourselves from pain, only to discover that those same walls can keep kindness from reaching us. We never became perfect people. We still had difficult days. But whenever one of us needed help, the other was there. And every time it rained at night, I remembered that knock at 2:17. The knock I almost ignored. The knock that reminded me how close I had come to missing one of the most important relationships of my life. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who may be going through a lonely season, and subscribe to Ripple of Kindness. Your support helps these stories reach people who need a reminder that second chances are real. And before you leave, comment, "Kindness always finds a way," if you believe one small act of compassion can change someone's life. Because sometimes, the person we ignore is carrying the very message our broken heart needs to hear.